I've shared with you stuff on this conversation that I've never shared in interviews. Literally came out of that session and I was like, oh, I'm back. That was the life then that led to like I'm Enough, that led to this album. The combination of that experience, the loving kindness meditations, the QiGong, I felt like I got given a golden ticket out of something that potentially could have taken me decades to find my way back out of the level of confusion that I was experiencing and the lack of self-belief and self-worth. My name's Tallulah Rendall and I am a QiGong teacher and a creative facilitator, a systemic coach, sound practitioner and a songwriter. And my life is about weaving all those elements together and supporting people into their hearts and their bodies and into empowerment.
It's really beautiful to share this space with you.
You're welcome.
And to chat in this way. It's quite a unique way to have a conversation, really. Very intentional. 4 years to the day yesterday, the podcast.
Oh, wow.
Started it 4 years ago.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I mean, it just feels like today is the first day. It's so interesting. But yeah, I think I'd like to start with what's the like common thread between all those things. And I noticed you said QiGong teacher first.
Because that's like at the core of everything is my QiGong practice. And that really gives me my sense of centered stability. And from there, I can really be in my heart. And when I'm kind of in that kind of grounded place of open-heartedness, then I tend to live a really healthy life and I feel really empowered. And in regards to my creativity, things flow. And with my facilitation, it enables me to hold a really safe and grounded and transformative space. So it's at the foundation, and it's also at the foundation because, and we chatted a little bit about this, it was basically my lifeline. So I spent from 18 until like 35 or so as like a touring musician, maybe a bit less, maybe 30, it's a full-time touring musician, and then just fully burnt out. I was having really bad panic attacks, was really anemic, had just been kind of solidly on the road without any tools of how to really keep my system healthy. And there was a lot of what was driving me to be a musician and to write, which was really stemming from unintegrated, unprocessed trauma. So it was this kind of like, am I allowed to swear on this?
You can say and really kind of do most things are allowed. There's not really. If it's not, I think we won't include it.
And this, what I want to say, clusterfuck, basically, it's just like, and I realized that I just had to radically change the way that I was living my life. And I put this call out to my community. Literally, it was just like, help.
When was this?
This was like 2010.
Does it feel that long ago? Because it's like 14 years, right?
Yeah, it's about 2010, 2009, 2010, sometime around then. I had just come back from touring Japan. I'd done Japan, Australia, New Zealand. I think it was around then. And, you know, couldn't walk upstairs, was so weak. And so, like, my system was so kind of panicked. I was kind of getting so anxious that I would have nosebleeds and I was becoming really quite agoraphobic.
So at the time, how were you coping with that? Because we all have mechanisms to get through.
So this is the point. It's like I just didn't have any. So I was completely bedbound. And that's when I really asked for help. And what happened was this Taoist priest called Graham appeared on my doorstep through this kind of route of friends. And he was a Harley Street acupuncturist, but he basically just did it for so little. And he would come as often as he could, and he gave me acupuncture. He started teaching me about nutrition, and he taught me about QiGong. And from the first session that I had with him, I felt my body just go whoosh. And then it was this practice that I could do on a daily basis that I would have an immediate response to. And so that summer I went on a QiGong camp. I just immersed myself in QiGong. And I thought I was going to stop doing music. But what happened was this transformation in my being that meant that once I'd kind of found my way back to health, the music started flowing again, but it started flowing in a really different way. There was a kind of cohesiveness to the songs and a clarity lyrically and melodically that wasn't present before that. So I can really track the cultivation of my QiGong practice with the albums that I've written, which is why for me Love Carries Me Home, which is the most recent one, there's a quality of presence lyrically, melodically. There's an embodiedness in it. And if I stack that against an album from like 2009, where it's just like I'm kind of out there in the land of kind of metaphorical kind of psychedeliciness, it's really ungrounded and really unclear, whereas there is now a clarity in me that I would say without doubt came from allowing, inviting and delving into the world of QiGong, and then training. I didn't train because I wanted to be a teacher, I just trained because I wanted to do as much of it as I could, and then the byproduct of that was I had to teach to qualify, and my resistance to teaching was so strong that my kind of mentor, she was like, well, you're such a sound being, why don't you integrate sound into your QiGong? So I started doing that, and then suddenly I realized that I could run voice empowerment workshops. And I started in kindergartens with little kids, and then this whole other system unfolded, and ended up running workshops, with getting people into their bodies and their voices, and working through the fears and anxieties that so many people hold around expression. Yeah. Which then led to me becoming a creative facilitator, which then led to me training as a systemic coach, which there's been this kind of unfolding. But it all comes back to being physically and mentally unwell and choosing a different path.
So the ungrounded, the ethereal kind of stuff, that metaphoric stuff that you spoke to around before, that was very different to now, that had a place. Like it must have been working for you to like be on tour, and like it resonated with people. Yeah. So I'm interested in like, the impact of that on you in terms of that unhealthy state that you were in. That kind of.
I mean, it's interesting because it's relative compared to, I was never a.
Could you just put the mic a bit closer? Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's all relative because, if I compare my early musical touring days, I was never a caner. I was never like getting really high and munted. That wasn't my thing. But like, it was just the sheer impact of being on the road, running a booking agency, running a record label because I wanted to release my albums as books. I didn't want to. So I was a fully independent artist. I was crowdfunding albums. So I basically just burnt out. It wasn't that I was just really fucked up and dysfunctional.
Well, what was the impact on like your relationships and that kind of stuff? Like it must have come at a cost, right? You're spending all this time doing the one thing that's causing you to burn out. What was the impact?
I mean, I think the impact was, and this was the part where I had the piece of work that I really had to do, is what was it that was driving me to do that?
Sure. What's the cause?
The kind of need to be seen or have some kind of value, and there was definitely something in that for me that I had to like meet and kind of understand and work through.
I think I'm most interested in like you meeting that side of you. So everyone I know will hear that and say, okay, I've got a bit of that going on, or maybe I've got a lot of that going on. And there's this kind of functional freeze situation. Talked about this on a recent podcast around the overlooked aspect of our times is people in this state of constantly just moving a lot and doing a lot, and time is slipping away. It feels like that. It's our relationship to time and how many things we have on the list of things to do. And then these health signals come in to like try and bring us back to, you know, wake up a little bit. So
mine's not in relationship to time, and I have friends who have this real issue around time, and I see them burning out because they're like, I've got to do so much. And I've got one particular friend, and he's just like, I find it really stressful watching his kind of social media stuff, because it's like, I've got to do this, blah, blah. And I'm like, creativity doesn't have to be that. That's not my experience of my relationship with creativity. It's not around the need to do it within a certain time frame.
I think to the body, that's the same thing.
What my particular part was, there was this kind of, you know, I went to boarding school when I was 7, and, you know, I come from a really amazing family of incredible, innovative entrepreneurs, and there was this kind of crazy thing of when I shone, there was like loads of support. And I think my kind of little psyche kind of tracked that when I was shiny, that would mean love. But then there was this weird kind of thing is that like I then got really badly physically bullied for it. And so it's quite confusing in a little kind of 7-year-old's mind as like kind of, okay, to get love, I need to be shiny and seen, but then that also creates kind of jealousy and bullying, and that kind of little thing was quite confusing for me. And I think my process with it was that I dissociated and just like would numb out to kind of other people's kind of criticism, and just was like, I'm just going to stay focused on doing what I do and love, which is to write and to bring people together and to play as a band, and to then kind of receive that love and validation from an audience. So I think that was my kind of dysfunctional relationship with my creative expression. And I think the fact that I was able to block the judgments and the no's and the kind of criticism just meant that I was just tunneled vision, and I was just like, I can just do this because I can be really resilient. So my particular flavor of what triggered my burnout was dissociation, just not listening and then just going poof. So now, as a consequence, and the impact of that meant that, and to answer your question about relationships, you know, that creativity, playing with my band, being on the road, different place every night, I was just like, I loved it so much. That was at the core of my life, and my health and my family and my relationships kind of orbited around there. And when I got sick and I realized that I had to change the constellation and place my health at the center, or my health and relationships, and then move my creativity just slightly outside, that's when I could have a more healthy relationship with it. And now, like, I'm like, so, you know, I've spent over a decade in working with somatic therapy and QiGong, and so my level of awareness in my body is really extreme now, which is great, and also it can be difficult. So if I go into London now for work, when I walk down Tottenham Court Road, like I did last week, it was like my body's reaction was like, whew, could feel the vigilance, the kind of the energy of like, oh, the I'm like, okay, I just need to slow down. Whereas historically I would have been like, and like kind of slightly dissociated and numbed out and got swept into it.
Yeah. And what are your tools to bring you back down in that state of kind of chaos, really, when you're in those environments?
it's the awareness. So the awareness of my body and the knowledge that I have to slow down. So practically that can be bringing my attention to my feet, walking slower, slowing my breathing down. More often than not, it will be me shaking out and doing some type of QiGong just to kind of like shake out that kind of fizz in my system. It'll be some physical movement.
Yeah. I'd love you to take us through a little QiGong practice as well.
Okay.
But first, I'd love you to talk a little bit more about the self-love journey and meeting yourself, understanding that you needed to rewrite those stories, or like go back and understand what was the driver of this behavior.
I don't think there's any point not rewriting the stories.
Okay.
But being present with them, going back and actually just being with them, and allowing my body to actually acknowledge certain traumatic things that happened in my life, and in being with them, allowing them to actually process. So a bit like the polar bear, the polar bear shot, and whether it's just the whole thing around Peter Levine's work, somatic therapy, this whole thing, the polar bear's like running across the Arctic, and it's like freaking out, and then they like tranquilize it hits the deck, they tag it, and when it wakes up, it just goes into that kind of shaking frenzy. It's kind of like shaking out all the adrenaline and the cortisol, and then it's just like, after a while, it's like, okay, gets up and walks off. And human beings, we don't do that. So often we'll go into the freeze and then not process the trauma. So my journey over the last 15 years has been going back to various different points and being there. And I've worked with amazing therapists. It's been through breath work. It's been through facilitated MDMA journeys for PTSD, which was just one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. I feel really grateful to have had the opportunity to do that, and to really go back to some gnarly places and really rewire the neural pathways in my brain.
So can you talk a bit more about that journey? What that was like?
So part of this last album, Love Carries Me Home, which was written in Frome, up the road, and started writing at the beginning of lockdown. And my dad was one of the first people to go into hospital, and he later died of COVID. And it was horrific. It was a horrific experience. And at the same time, I was in a relationship that was psychologically, there's a lot of gaslighting and a lot of manipulation, and that there was a real trauma bond that happened. So I can take ownership for my part in it. You end up in these situations because you both got work to do. But it really did a number on me. And I ended up having a kind of friends kind of intervening, and like it's how I ended up in Stroud, basically. And we were still in lockdown, and I basically went into this journey of rebuilding myself and my life, and that was held by the Sangha that I'm part of. Sangha, so it's a Buddhist community. And it teaches a man called Bergs. And every day during lockdown, pretty much every day for, it felt like years, he would hold a loving kindness meditation. And that process was my lifeline. It was the loving kindness practice. It was the QiGong. It was singing, writing, which led to this album, which led to I'm Enough. It led to all of these things. So that was kind of the process that I was in. And then alongside that, I had this incredible therapist who was just literally holding my hand back to health. And along this way, he was like, you know, you've always been one of my most frustrating clients because you've got so much health in your system. You know, you really do.
What does that mean, do you think?
For him, he was like, you've got so much health in your system. You've got the capacity to resource yourself, to nourish yourself. You're a functioning, you are a functioning human being.
Okay. And
you have this capacity to derail because of certain things. And I was really struggling to find, you know, even though I was kind of making my journey and my process and Bergs and the QiGong, and, you know, I was writing all this music, there was still a huge, you know, I'd been through this really horrific experience and was trying to make sense of it all and understand how I'd found myself in this reality. And this, you know, he was like, you know, if you can, you know, find a facilitator to do an MDMA processing thing, that could be your golden ticket. And I went on a huge journey, and it took...
Had you taken MDMA before that?
Yeah, as a kid I'd been like, but I was like...
So was there any preconception of what it might be like, or what? Because that, even in me, there's this, like, I know what it feels like to be on MDMA. I've had it a lot. How would being assisted in therapy help? But I know the power of it because it's, you know, phase 2 or 3 trials in America, and it's, you know, making incredible things happen for, especially for, PTSD and ex-war veterans and things like that.
So my trust in the therapist that I was working with, my QiGong practice, and my comprehensive understanding of somatic therapy and IFS, like, I was like, I've got the tools, so I could imagine that those combined with MDMA, when looking at a particular trauma, I was like, man, that could be really potent.
Yeah. Did you have clarity on what the trauma was?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people might not know, you know, on their journeys.
Well, in this instance, it was like, you know, I'd experienced extreme gaslighting and kind of emotional manipulation, and it totally fried my conception of reality.
Okay.
And I was really confused. So it's like that, you know, that was the top level. You know, done a huge amount of work around all the other pieces that were driving me as a young musician around the needing to be seen, and that kind of part of like the disassociation, that piece. Like, I don't feel I'm a musician now or a facilitator because I need to be seen. I just do it because it's what I'm here to do. You know, and I love supporting other people to find their way back to their hearts, bodies, and creative expression.
Yeah.
So it's not about me so much any longer, whereas before it was like, I need, you know, it's like...
It's the hero's journey, right?
Totally.
It's moving through, it's almost alchemizing pain into making it your purpose.
Totally. And I mean, that was just completely like crystalline and summed up at Medicine a few years ago when we were doing the cacao ceremony on the main stage, and like the footage afterwards of like, I mean, I think Dia said that we gave cacao to over 2,000 people, and the footage of people singing I'm Enough, it's just everybody like hugging and crying and going through this process of just acknowledging what it is to feel those limiting beliefs, that you're not good enough, and to meet those parts, those wounded parts of ourselves, and to know that you're kind of not in it alone. And I mean, I had no idea that song would have the reaction that it had.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, you know, just it's coming through, and now all these other people are having these, it's enriching and supporting their lives, and that's really fucking awesome.
I want to get back onto the therapy, but, but first, why do you think it's so poignant at this time? Why do you think so many people are doubting that they're enough, that don't feel enough? What do you think that, because it is so rife?
I'd say it's because we live in a traumatized society.
Mm-hmm. But what's at the root of that, do you think, collectively? In the West?
I would say that the root of that is, you know, systemic, the capitalist drive, the kind of, you know, the fact that it's normal, like trauma is normal now, burnout is kind of normal now. It's like the, you know, the Gabor Mate book, The New Normal, kind of. It's just like, you know, if we were to invert, like, it feels like our world is driven by the mind. And if that system was shifted around so that we were all actively moving from a place of embodied heart awareness, our drivers and the way that we lived our lives would be very, very different. But my experience is we live in a reality where, like, constantly being sold stuff to look better, the next health thing, to look fitter, to live longer, to, you know, the kind of Botox generation, the kind of this thing of, okay, I don't like the way I look, I can have an operation to change that, or I don't like this, I don't want to be in this relationship, I'm just going to swipe right, and there's like a plethora of, you know, choice. And I think in my feeling of the, you know, whenever I tap out of kind of social networking, my phone, I'm like, my nervous system and whole being just kind of is so happy.
When's the happiest you've been?
When's the happiest I've been?
Because you just painted a picture there and something dropped in for me. And I remember being on a farm in Australia, and I had 360 views every single day, the sky, the sun, and it was so spacious. There was nothing there. It was called the flat. It was like, it's just nothing. But I was so at peace. I was so content. And I just said, how can I possibly ever be sad? Of course, the human experience brings that in, and that's important. But I just, like, in terms of the perspective of like how I was feeling at that time, I was just like, how could I ever have, like, this is just everything and I have nothing right now. So how, I'm seeing the same 6 people every day for 3 months. There's not much going on, but I was so content. So how could I possibly, with more, you know, how could I possibly feel not this happy? Interesting.
The happiest I've been, I think it would also be in nature. I can think of lots of moments where recently, just being by the lakes in Woodchester, you know, in the sunshine with our amazing community, I've had so many moments where I'm like, this is what it's like to just feel a kind of a peaceful ease, you know, not running from the tiger.
That the new version of the tiger.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's my feeling. It's kind of like I think, what would it be like if we lived in a world where it was just the container was different?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that, you know, we were all in relationship with nature. We all had a connection to our hearts. There was all a kind of like loving kindness was the
default
setting. You know, whenever I'm in that place, I buy less stuff. I run myself ragged less. There's just, you know, I've got more capacity for other people. I've got more altruism for the planet. It's just like, but I feel like it's something that has to be really safeguarded because it's not the default setting, you know? And I think we live a really privileged reality.
Yeah, we have a lot of choice.
And, you know, when I go...
More than ever.
Yeah.
More than a king did in any other period of time.
But it's also really interesting, though, because in the same breath, you know, the science and all the stats show that we're the most obese, we're the most medicated, we're the most numbed out.
Sure. Well, if you want to find happiness, you have to go to some sort of tribe somewhere to find real, and that's just presence. It's presence without, you say altruism, but it's like being present with your surroundings and yourself more than you're not. And like not having the language to even contemplate not being present, you know?
Yeah.
Do you think there's something around parenting of how we raise our children?
100%.
Around not enough because we will reward certain behaviors and label others?
Yeah, I mean, I now look back at my parents and think, oh my God. You know, and I look around me at all our friends who are the same age as my parents when, you know, they're bringing up me. And I look at them trying to keep their shit together, trying to make it all work, trying to, you know, and, you know, my parents fucked a lot of stuff up, but they were just doing the best. They literally, that was their awareness at the time. They weren't malevolent people. They were just, you know, human beings struggling with their own stuff. And that had consequences on me as a child, but it was never from a place of lack of love or, you know, I know wholeheartedly with both my parents that they would be mortified that their behavior had impact in a way that would be detrimental to me and cause kind of lifelong traumas. But they were just doing their best. And
have they owned that?
Well, it's not well, my dad's passed on, so that's not something. It would be really with him that those conversations, and there was never.
Did much shift for you when he passed? How you could show up, or did differently, or?
I would so he passed 2 years ago now, and I would say it's taken me until the last 2 months to really let go of the kind of the way that I related to men as a consequence of my relationship to him. So he was very avoidant, a very charismatic, amazing man, and but was always very like sometimes present, sometimes not present. So for me, in relationship, I would often choose men that were really charismatic and dynamic, but then
not present,
or just kind of then would be kind of unavailable, or there would be like a bit of a pendulum switch. But that was just normal for me, and so I think the biggest shift now is the knowledge that that's not normal, and that's not what I have. That there are other options out there, and I have been in a relationship with. I mean, I've had some amazing partners who haven't been that. But since Dad died, Dad died, I definitely went into a process and dated men that were really, really similar to him. And it was only like more recently I've been like, oh, that's what's going on, you know.
Yeah.
And this kind of real commitment or acknowledgement that there was a piece of work that I needed to do around letting go of my dad, grieving him, and making a very clear choice that that's not the type of person that I want to be in relationship with, and that I can choose differently.
Is there any things you look out for now that you know aren't going to be healthy? And I'd say my one is when it's so heightened. The love is like there's like heightened states of highs and lows. They're extreme. Yeah. Which is beautiful and it's like captivating, but ultimately it's not like, it's so not grounded. But it isn't exciting. Like the groundedness sometimes isn't exciting. Maybe a mature love or like the heightened states of all of it is exciting. And the familiarity, there's somewhat of a subconscious familiarity of something that gets you going. Sometimes I don't know if it's like rooted in what I need or just what I'm, craving, which it can be two things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd say my red flags are similar. I would say that it's if I have a sense of real butterflies in my stomach, that for me is like, oh, that's a trauma response. That's me kind of feeling adrenalized. That's not me. That's a flag. That's not a positive sign. But if I meet somebody and I'm just like feeling really at ease and I'm just in my body,
yeah,
and I can feel my body, that's a really good sign. But if I'm out or then that's other red flags for me are someone who's really like love bomby and really like because with that, there is my experience of that is every time that's happened to me, that's not sustainable. And there's a kind of flip side to that. And so I'm very wary of men who come in kind of hard, strong, fast, right up in your grill. I'm like,
yeah, it can come from an insecurity, right?
There's my experience of it is that it's kind of like I'm shiny, I'm new, and suddenly like, oh my God, I've got to have that. And then they're kind of like,
though, in the romantic novels and the films, it's like, how much does that influence our behavior, right? It influences my behavior of how I want to show up for the feminine in that kind of way. Like there's something to it. I remember the Notebook of like saying, and it makes me kind of cringe now, but in the Notebook he says, when I want something, I've got to have it. And it's just like, and it's so like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that see that now, like, I think if I, like 15 years ago, I might have been like, but now I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Well, we all want to be wanted, right? When we don't feel like we're wanted.
But I don't want to be possessed, like, I don't even like possessed, like, but I don't want to be put in a box. And I was chatting to someone last night, chatting to an ex-partner of mine last night, and talking about the difference between negotiation and compromise. And like, I really like the idea that, there's a situation and you negotiate, and you find that even platform. And then it's yes, win-win for everybody. But compromise for me is now like a bit of a flag. So someone said to me the other day, what's, I was saying I've got a bit of an anxiety, like if there's a lot of drama in someone's life and they're inconsistent, that's a massive red flag for me. And someone said to me,
we all know that person.
Said, is there been drama in your life because of the way that you live your life? Because you're always on tour and you're really busy and you're and, does that create a drama in your relationships? And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. No, that's never been a thing. And his response was like, because you'd have to change your thing, like to be in a relationship. And I was just like, no, no, this is like I'm here in life to do what I'm doing, and it's taken me a really long time to find my flow and my confidence and my way of being, and I'm really happy. I've got amazing friends, I love my work, I've got an incredible family, like I'm probably the happiest I've ever been, and I'm not going to compromise any of that to be in relationship. I will have a negotiate so that my partner feels held, supported, and part of that constellation. But I'm not gonna suddenly be like a stay-at-home mum, or like fold my wings in so that somebody else feels secure and stable.
Yeah,
they need to feel secure and stable and accepting that I love them as I am, and I can show up and love somebody as I am in this way.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really important message. I definitely was that guy.
What, the one who like you would need me to change?
Perspective. That was my perspective.
Yeah.
on like what it took to be in relation.
Yeah.
And what I wanted. And at the root of that is like to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be in the kind of unhealthy sense, but because I don't agree now that anyone really should let go of who they are to be something different for you.
Yeah.
And like, it's like, it's not 50-50, it's 100-100. It's like getting into partnership with someone to enhance both of your lives, not to like stop doing the things that clearly make you happy.
Yeah.
I think feels powerful for me at this time to meet someone now, because I know who I am. And I was with someone for a best part of a decade. And that was all of those things we talked about. And now meeting someone, because like I know who I am, I know what I need, I know what I know the stuff I've moved through. And if someone hasn't been there and understood things about themselves, it's like, it makes it kind of easier in a way to like know me, to know what I need, to then filter that and just, it takes less time, I guess, to meet someone. But then also letting go of it ever happening. And I always say this with kids, I haven't got kids, and I have to say, like, I have to let go of it ever happening, because if I don't, then I'll do it for the wrong reasons, you know?
Yeah.
So back to the MDMA. This is a podcast, we tangent.
Back to the MDMA. So I found somebody that felt really good for me to work with, and it was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life, which I only think I could have navigated at that point in my life. As in, if I'd done it 5 years before or 10 years before, I just don't think I would have had the embodiment tools to be able to be with it, because my experience of it was 12 hours. 5 of those hours was extreme pain in my head and extreme heat in my head, as I basically, it felt like, they call it the waiting room in MDMA processing, is that when you're kind of just like, dum-da-dum-da-dum, you're like, this is feeling really blissed out, I'm really good, and then suddenly something comes up. And what then came up for me was, it was literally like a photo album of every single moment in that particular relationship where I hadn't held my sovereignty, every single moment where I'd been confused, or felt gaslit or manipulated. And as I was seeing these images, my brain was like, it was so hot and it was so fucking painful. And after, I don't know how many hours, I mean, this particular this part of the journey went on for about 4 or 5 hours, apparently.
Was it in a room?
So I was lying down, I had an eye mask on, there was music going on, and there was just one other person holding space. Yeah. And I was kind of wrapped in blankets. But I got to this point where I was like, I don't know how much more pain I can take. My head feels like it's about to fucking explode. It's like the most intense migraine and heat. And I had one of my huge singing bowls, as the facilitator passed it to me. I just placed it on my heart, and I basically started playing it. And everything stopped. The heat stopped. My body just went... And I did that until the point where I felt like, okay, I'm resourced enough to go back in and finish this. So I took the bowl off and went back in for another however many hours of that particular. And I think it was part of the whole 12-hour process, but the pain and the heat that I had to literally just be with was around 5 hours. And afterwards, the next day when I was asking the facilitator, what the fuck was going on? And she was like, I've only ever experienced that in the most extreme senses of grooming, when literally the neural pathways of your brain were realigning back to where they once were. And I was just like, oh my God, And that isn't just like to put all this on the particular person I was in relationship with.
Yeah.
Because, you know, he is a beautiful human. It's the alchemy of his stuff,
Absolutely,
my stuff, and lockdown, COVID. You know, we didn't see anybody for months and months and months. So there's a whole bunch. It was like the perfect storm to facilitate the level of PTSD that I experienced. But I literally came out of that session and I was like, oh, I'm back. Like it was literally like the kind of trauma bond that was still kind of slightly in the background, the kind of confusion, it was done. And I think for me, that was the lifeline that led to like I'm Enough, that led to this album. The combination of that experience, the loving kindness meditations, the QiGong, blah, 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 blah. I felt like I got given a golden ticket out of something that potentially could have taken me decades to find my way back out of the level of confusion that I was experiencing, and the lack of self-belief and self-worth and ability to ultimately to trust myself, because my experience of gaslighting, the biggest part of the damage for me was me losing complete sense of trust in my sense of reality, of what was true.
Yeah.
So having that back again was like, oh my God, okay.
How did that manifest day to day?
Post the experience or during the experience?
Maybe a bit both. As in, after, like just maybe, even the whole time. How did that confusion of not making sense with reality, how did it show up?
So, for example, it's really hard to give examples of this because it seems like a really banal example. But if I try to explain an example, the first one that comes to mind, but when you think about this becoming your reality for like 6 months. So one thing that used to really confuse me is we were doing, suddenly we moved everything online and trying to find ways of surviving financially as a musician, as a facilitator working with sound. And sound is hard to work with online. And I went on this deep dive into trying to find ways of doing sound baths and doing singing circles. And I managed to find a way of doing it and getting paid well to do it. And that would really trigger this person. Brought up loads of jealousy and acting out. So how that would present would be like, I'd be like, okay, I'm holding a session now in about half an hour. Do you know what you need from the living room or from the kitchen so that you could then leave the space so I can hold the session?
Yeah.
And there would be like yeah, of course, I'm here to support you. But then I'd be like, literally, it would be coming up to doing the session and I'd be like trying to center myself, and he would start coming into the room and move furniture, or he would start cooking in the kitchen, knowing that I was literally about to suddenly hold a really big group of people. And I would start getting kind of frustrated, or like be like, I've asked you, this is my timeline, the timeline. I need you to support me by enabling me to have a clear and quiet space so that I can get ready to hold this group. And then there would be like some kind of kick off, and there would be like some kind of drama, and and he would like get really arsey and then storm. And then I would be like feeling really upset. And it was basically this weird like sabotaging of everything that I was doing. And I found it really confusing. I really didn't understand why he was getting so being so weird. And rather, like, now if someone did that, I'd be like, the fuck are you doing? Get the fuck out. Like, I've asked you, like, I'm doing a session. This is like the container. Yeah. Like, it's like, please respect. But I got into this like, I've done something wrong, he's really upset now, and then post the session there would be this whole like stonewalling, and he'd sulk, and it was all tied up in this jealousy that that I was getting work and he wasn't getting work, and it just was really confusing. I didn't really understand why. I thought I was being really clear in my requests, and that would trigger this type of behavior.
So you started doubting.
So I was like doubting, like, am I being clear? Should I be like, oh God, he's really like, oh, poor guy. It's really hard for him because I'm being really, like, I'm getting loads of work. And so I would go into like making myself smaller. And inevitably, in the end, I just stopped. Yeah. And I actually stopped because it just caused so much stuff that I was like, I can't deal with the stonewalling and the, I'm going to take, and then the love would kind of go, and then he'd start, there'd be lots of, he'd disappear for hours chatting to other women and all this kind of stuff. It was like this kind of punishment energy that would then appear. And I'd be like, oh my God, that I would just tap out straight away at any signs of that type of kind of thing. But at the time, I just didn't really understand, and I thought I could help him and digga, and it was okay to be treated in that way. Whereas now, like, no fucking way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You've got that going on, but then you've also got to move through those things. I know, having conflict in a relationship, the impact of someone who's working for themselves, trying to self-actualize in the process, and go on their path of really contributing to a meaningful experience for themselves and others. I mean, we had both of us doing that. Yeah. And it was a therapist that actually reflected that to us and was like, you are both trying to become something and grow, and then there's this conflict happening, and it is impacting both of you, which it was, as it does, as a relationship conflict does. But then, like, you're going to show up for like your work, and it's that weight as well. It's like, it feels like it's stuck. It's stuck. Like, there's a lot of words that people use. There's a great, maybe it's Sarah something. She's been on Mark Rowe's podcast, but she talks about trauma and stuff, but she just uses the word stuck. Yeah. It's like stuck points. Yeah. And it's that kind of energy that really makes sense. It's like you just can't move forward.
Yeah, you can't move forward. And there's, the lessons and the growth in that, and the parts where I take ownership. Like, it was me that was...
at every point.
At all these points. But it's like where I'm clear in my... boundaries now, and my own red flags around codependency, and like needing, feeling responsible for someone else's stuff. Yeah. And I remember once he got really cross with me because I'd written "Be a Little Kinder," and then I changed the tempo, and I like demoed it all up, and he was like, "Can I hear what you're doing?" And I was like, yeah. And he got really cross with me. He was like, "You've changed it. Like, why didn't you ask me? Why?" Like, I was like, "What do you mean? Why didn't I ask you? It's my song. Why?" And he got like in a total thing about like being excluded, and I'd done this thing with and it's like, wow, this is so, like, all things now that would be total red flags of stuff.
It's so interesting because I've been that guy. And obviously not. So
how does that feel for me to hear? How's that for you to hear me?
It's just interesting because I'm reflecting on previous times and how I've contributed to the madness, let's say. Yeah. Because there's a part to play in every situation, how we're co-creating the experience, I believe. And maybe we could move on to this of how, like, it fundamentally is quite empowering to then believe that, I'm actually creating my reality by not understanding or like being conscious of what I'm doing and how I'm living, especially in relationships. Like I ask myself that all the time. It's like, well, where's the ownership in this? What part can I play? Yeah. and like speaking to that immediately. And I say to people when people I'm chatting to are in a relationship and one of them's growing and like I want to do more, and I give my partner this book, and you know, the classic kind of I want them to come on the journey with me, and I'm like, when did you get into this relationship, and why did you get into a relationship with this person? And likelihood is they had a lot in common at the time. So I'm like, so can you take ownership that you've changed and they haven't, and now you want them to change too? And it's like, you can own that, and it's like come from that place, and like it's just responsibility.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I genuinely am grateful for that experience. It was one of the hardest experiences of my whole life. And I really don't say that lightly. And yet it catalyzed a journey for me, which has brought me just so on the other side of it, you know, going into this really deep into the Sangha, the loving kindness practices. It forced me to up level my relationship with QiGong. It forced me to I had to just keep delving deeper and deeper and deeper and address my role, and then to have forgiveness, you know. And can I forgive him? I can forgive him, you know, and I can forgive myself, and I can feel real empathy for two human beings stuck on a little life raft in one of the most weirdest times in history. Not in history, that sounds a bit dramatic, but like a really weird time in history. I don't think our relationship, we would have stayed together if we hadn't gone into lockdown. I think like the red flags would have come up, and my kind of community around us would have been like, "The fuck are you doing?" Yeah,
it's so important to have community.
Totally.
Totally. Yeah, that you live with, and it's like you live around, and people you can trust, and that can hold that space for both of you, really.
Completely. Yeah. I mean, it's that. Yeah, I mean, my sort of my family and my friends, you know, and I was in a relationship for 6 or 7 years. We got engaged, and we didn't end up getting married. But he is one of my bestest friends in the world. You know, we met at uni, and it was actually him who in lockdown was like, "Luli, what is going on? This is not like I don't like. You're not okay. This situation is not okay. You know, he's not treating you well." And then it was literally him. It was like my best mates who were like, "Come on, babe. Let's get you out of here." You know, and this the love and like the gratitude that I feel from my friends who accept me as I am. And that can be a really fragile kind of needy little human that wants lots of cuddles, or it can be someone that's like super dynamic and really fiery and has purpose, and it's like, and I can go in and out of radio contact depending on where I am in the world, and there is an acceptance and celebration of me for all of the parts of me, and encouragement, and you know, witnessing and challenging of like, okay, you need to like address, you know, I'm finding this challenging, can you look at this? And accountability. Yeah. And I feel so grateful for that.
How am I enabling this person not to show up?
Yeah. You know, my role, and that's one of my best mates who, she was also part of this little group who was like, "Come on, babe, you need to get out of this one." And when I moved to Stroud, and about a year later, and I'd moved into a new house, and I'd written all these songs, and we'd played medicine and had this incredible response. And she was like, "Okay, what are you doing now? How are you making the album?" And I was like, "Oh God, I don't know." And she's like, you are going to make the album, aren't you? Come on, like you could do another crowdfunder, you know." And I was like, and it was literally it was them then who were like, "Yeah, you can like do why don't you just do and it was suddenly those people that had kind of, you know, been the like, "Let's get you out," who were then encouraging that. And then I literally crowdfunded that album in 2 weeks. And it was their support and encouragement to do that. You know, and lots of them are singing on the album as part of the choir and the Heart Sutra and stuff. And it's like, wow, like, you know, gratitude. such gratitude for that.
I feel like I dodged your question around how does it feel listening to kind of your story around being the person who is actually causing a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sadness there, but it's also a little still confusion of like why, you know, because my mind always wants to find out like the real depth and the reason of why this is happening, why this is playing out, why I'm so like there's many different tendencies and traits that I had. One was like commenting on things and like having an opinion. And I guess another one would be being really short and blunt. And it still happens now with people. I can own it quicker. And I know how it feels in my body, but it's like an unemotional statement, which can feel like quite hard. And yeah, like I want to get to the root of what that is, but ultimately I don't know. And there's awareness there, but awareness without action is just kind of freeze, I'd say.
Do you know what you feel insecure about?
Do I?
Do you know, like...
Yeah, ultimately.
And do you know what kind of gave birth to that insecurity?
Yeah, for sure.
And have you kind of journeyed with, like, finding peace around that?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I feel definitely at ease with myself. And when those things do show up, I'm very quick to accept them. And they don't escalate, and they don't get shut down. Because it's a side of me that I don't like. And then if I shame it, if I judge it, it of course doesn't go anywhere, but it gets bigger. And it doesn't actually dissipate. I don't make space for it. Like I didn't make space for it then. But like accepting it now and like giving that part of me love that needs actually to potentially shut others down in a moment. Like that side of me is just, it's like a stress response. It's when I'm stressed. You know, it used to show up for me so much when I felt that didn't have time, didn't have my shit sorted out. And then it would just manifest in these little like, I just didn't have time to have a conversation, or I didn't have time to like entertain someone else's stuff. So I'd just shut it down, or I would like kind of label it as not a big deal or something. But yeah, it's not straightforward either. It's like there's so many little things that would come kind of up and around their daily interaction. But yeah, I definitely think it's do you know what? It's hard to know, because when you're not in that situation with someone, because I'm not anymore for the reason that we just couldn't move forward in both of our lives. And it was just it was a conscious decision that we had to make, because it was, you know, it was kind of a coping for a lot of time. But it was it's hard to know without being in a relationship, I think.
Have you been in a relationship since?
Not I'd say like officially. I wouldn't say like it's not an official relationship, no. Not like two people saying yes. Yeah. Completely.
Yeah.
But it's
do you feel scared to be in a relationship?
No. Not at all. But I've got the awareness to know that it's not gone, and I don't pretend it to be gone.
Yeah.
I'll meet it when it comes. But until then, it's like when I'm in the therapy room, or I'm like, when does it show up? Like I'm on a retreat or something, and I'm like, fucking hell, I feel great, environment's safe, lots going on. It's not until I'm triggered or there's an emotional charge of something that I can then meet that side of me and then work with it and then journey with it. But it doesn't show itself much on the podcast. It doesn't show itself. And people think they know me because they hear the podcast. It's like, oh, no. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I used to have this experience of loads of people projecting stuff onto me, men and women. Predominantly it was women. For a long time it would be like, you're really shiny, and as a consequence I feel like this. I'm in your shadow, or you make me feel this. I feel like this around you because of this. Yeah. And then it started showing up in men, and it was really challenging to just be like, I'm just doing my thing, and me doing my thing is triggering something in some people I don't know, or then people that I do care about, that's bringing up some sense of inadequacy in them.
It's revealing something.
And I found it so painful that I then actively started sharing my vulnerability more, because I was like, I'm going to challenge all of you so that you can't put these projections on me. So when I do shows, I try and be as like honest and vulnerable of my stuff, my experiences, my like raw, this is me, to try and kind of put a prick in that balloon of like stuff. And it's really interesting. There's a few people where it's like recently I've had to just be like, I can't be in dialogue. I can't keep on being on the receiving end of just me being me, and that triggering some part of you that makes you feel inadequate. It's just, I can't change myself. I can hear your difficulty and hold empathy and stuff for that, but like just me being me, it's just me being me. You need to let me be me. Yeah, that's my experience with that particular thing of like some people thinking they know me because they've interpreted their experience of me, and me then being like, right, I'm gonna
music, right? Yeah.
So exactly, just hearing those songs or whatever, and she's got some of the stuff that So when I've gone in to share like stuff around trauma or difficult, and there's been like oh wow, she's a human being, and it's actually brought so much more connection. And I guess that's something that I'm now like, I'm just going to keep leaning into that vulnerability and honesty and sharing. But then it gets kind of tricky, because then people know loads about you. And then that's quite kind of like, it's like the floodlighting thing of like, you've shared and then suddenly everyone knows everything about you.
I know.
And that's vulnerable.
Yeah. I think as long as you're speaking from your experience.
Yeah.
But then it does bring others it can bring others in, that vulnerability.
I mean, my hope in sharing I've shared with you stuff on this conversation that I've never shared in interviews. And my kind of willingness to do that is with the hope, well, because you asked the questions and I felt to answer honestly, but now kind of reflecting, because you said to me if there's stuff that I want to cut out, after we'd kind of had a really open conversation, it'd be like, well, no, this is what's unfolded. And if there's someone that watches and listens to this and it inspires and supports them, whether it's whatever part of this conversation we've talked about, whether it's burnout or whether it's the commitment to follow your passion and actually create and then share that in the world, or whether it's working through PTSD, my hope is that, someone watching will feel that it's possible because another human being who's just another human being has done it.
I think that's the biggest piece. I think that's the biggest piece of like humanizing both people and like just speaking truth, but also with the knowledge, because there's so much projection also of like, who's to blame, who's the person who's done wrong, how can we kind of make sense of this situation, the pain that you went through or the confusion, make sense of it by labeling and saying, well, that's narcissism, that's this. And it's like, hold on a minute, like labeling just causes more separation, and there's reasons and context to all of this stuff.
Totally.
And how far do you want to take it? Who's responsible? How far do you want to take that down the timeline of history? And you can't. So it's really just how do we act and come into this more of a, like you've been in retreats, you've held retreats, and the power in that is everyone in circle, which we haven't got enough of. I was recently at Tony Riddle's at 42 Acres, 100 Human Experience. We had a men's and women's circle. I was in the men's. The amount of men in a circle, about maybe 30, 40 men that had never been in a circle, like all ages.
Wow.
That probably maybe 10 people, maybe less.
I say wow, but that doesn't surprise me.
It doesn't surprise you, but it's still sad. It feels sad that there's been no circle of like sitting, let's reveal something, let's ask them difficult questions, let's have a container and just speak and agree that this is a nice confidential space. Yeah. And it just doesn't happen. So how are we supposed to coexist when you've just got this back and forth, labeling from a distance, not understanding, not leaning in mentality? I
also have a curiosity around the separateness of men and women's circles.
Sure.
And the importance of a mixed circle.
Sure. There's plenty of them.
And it's just, but actually like really a conscious help, like conscious it sounds, I mean, but like with intention. I think there's just so much shadow in all of this work. And,
What are you thinking?
What I was thinking is just the irony of it all is that, like, we teach what it is that we need to learn for ourselves. So my work has been so focused around the heart, sure. That's been my pathway to healing, and there's also been my shadow and my wounding in that, and the wounds that if we kind of have the courage to go there and unfurl and reintegrate and transform, but ultimately the thing of a room full of facilitators, all kind of our roots are all in some type of trauma, and then we are there kind of creating all of this kind of and depending on how cleanly the system is set up is how much everyone's acting out their own stuff and able to kind of circumnavigate and avoid stuff because we've got the language, because we've got a certain degree of awareness or certain tools. And I guess the fact that some of the stuff that we're talking about, whether it happens, we're not talking about this happening in a bank in London. My experience of kind of manipulation, gaslighting, was being in relationship from another, conscious facilitator.
Yeah.
Just because we're doing the work doesn't mean we're actually doing the work. So,
it's true.
So that's
absolutely. It can be actually worse
because it's within the guise of like, I'm safe because I've got
just get better at justifying
basically, or like using certain language.
Form of coping, yeah.
Or
our coping mechanisms get better. Well,
or we go into, or I would say I could go into facilitator role.
Sure.
Or someone else might go into, and then suddenly you're kind of you're facilitating within the relationship, and there's a whole bunch of kind of shadow and avoidance that might be. I don't know. It's really interesting.
No, I love that. So, what would you say are one or two really important things for any individual who's facilitating or in this work, in this space? Maybe just some advice for me of like, what's a couple of things that are like, I can think of one, having a space where you can be held and be supported and reveal and speak your truth. Because
is this within a relationship, or is this what are you talking about within
everyone?
For everybody? Just like is in your day-to-day reality.
Yeah,
what would be your takeaways?
Because we know circles. Yeah. We also exist in the kind of maybe the underbelly of like what we'd call more conscious communities, or like people doing the work. And like, what do you think are some ingredients to make that stronger and more rooted?
So I would say one of the key things for me is a commitment to expanding the capacity to be with your own discomfort. So, and what I mean by that is, if you say something right now and that's activating me, if I can just sit with that physical sensation in my body, really be with it and allow what's underneath that, what's the wound that's underneath that, that's really being activated, that's not got absolutely nothing to do with you as Chris the person, it's just that. So tools and ways of resourcing yourself so you can actually be with how you're feeling in your body, because my experience of that is that I will then become less reactive, because I'm more willing to actually just sit and be like, okay, that's bringing up some charge in my body. Okay, where's that coming from? I can just feel it in my chest, feel that in my belly. I'm just going to be with that. I'm going to be with that until my breath kind of stills and softens, and actually can come back to being back in my body, and then maybe say to you, that was really challenging for me. I've got some stuff around that, or whatever it might be, and to kind of to take space, to create distance from a charge by being able to sit with the charge, if that makes sense. So ultimately it would be, for me, clocking that I've got something to work on with that, and that I need to I need to hold some space for that to process, and then to communicate to you my needs around that. And then that's you to be able to choose whether you meet those needs or not, and whether you do or don't.
Not be dependent on it.
Gives me the information as to whether my next steps. So that would be one. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an independent, not codependent.
Yeah. To really know when to leave a moment, because
that's hard. Communicating
in that moment. Yeah. So there's always some I was recently listening to a Brené Brown thing. I do authentic leadership coaching, and I work with corporates around, specifically with women, but I also do kind of team supporting workshops and retreats, and it's really, really amazing, because you're working with women or people who are so incredibly driven, and they're like, but there might be a total lack of knowledge and awareness around, for this instance, around the body and how to avoid burnout, and how to safeguard your own health, and how to communicate in a way that's authentic and
not reactive. But also, if you're walking into a room and you want to do a pitch, how to actually do that from a place of empowerment, not like and the voice exactly. And so I was listening to Brené Brown, The Power of Vulnerability again. She's great. I think there's such gems in what she says, and her thing is like, again, like if I'm activated and realizing that I'm activated and nothing positive is going to happen, it's just like, we're going to pause, we're going to take a time out, and I'll be back. We'll circle back in here, but right now, nothing good's going to come if I stay in this conversation. Yeah. So that for me is like it's to be really mindful that I'm activated, and I need to. So it's a bit like the other thing of being with the charge in the system, but clocking when I'm triggered. Yeah. So yeah, I'd say that it's like know yourself to know when you're triggered, and that trigger might be you're dissociated, you're just not in your body. That's a trigger. Okay, take a moment. Yes, I was just thinking, I'm in my head so much, that can be a symptom of the trigger, and I'm just like trying to be right. I'm just trying to like wait for my turn to speak because I've got so much to say. And like really prove this point. Yeah. And I'm just so not in my body.
So a really good technique for that is wiggling your toes. When you notice that you've got like kind of loads of energy in your head,
got it.
It just brings your awareness down into the lower part of your body. So cultivating more. Basically, there's a great thing in that Berg's always talks about, is if you imagine most of us in our day-to-day reality, if you imagine like a triangle that's upside down, so the base is here and like the point is at my root, and up here it's just like chaos. It's like the minor and like when you're up here, you're not grounded and you're not in your heart. It's just like noise and chaos. But actually through the practices, whatever practice you choose, for me it's QiGong, meditation, movement, dance, whatever, the triangle comes back to where we want it to be, which is the base at my root. And the energy, my energy is in my lower dantian, it's in my root here. So I'm grounded and I'm connected. And when I'm there, my heart can settle. And if I communicate from there, that's really it's cooking the gas.
And that's the breath, right, as well.
It's just there. But it's the embodiment, it's the embodied presence. I'm in my body.
Yeah.
And I'm with how my body is engaging with this situation, and I'm in that flow of grounded, open-hearted connection, versus I'm in my mind and I've just got to blah, 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 blah.
And also your voice changes, and that can be
totally
an acknowledgement of, where's my voice? Is it coming from here, or is it coming from here? And
again, that's an awareness and the perception. And that's something that I really noticed with all the albums, is that Graham, who is the acupuncturist who turned up on my doorstep and basically gave me this lifeline of practice, when he came to one of my gigs, I think it was for the second album, he's like, you went up onto your tiptoes about like 200 times in the first couple of songs. You were just like always disconnecting. You were just raising up. And it was really interesting just to be like, now I'm like really like a very,
I mean, your stage presence in Stroud, I was like, oh my God, I was so blown away. Just how like, I was like, you've moved through some shit. I could just tell. That was what I was thinking. I was like, someone who can just be in there. If you were so, I felt you were so in your body, but like you were able to just, I don't know, like from the off. It was like, it wasn't even needing a warm up. It was just like, boom. And that first song you played, I was just captivated. It was insane.
Thank you. So you found it captivating. What kind of like, what was
I think it was
more
like
about that experience for you?
Wow, how it made me feel. I mean, my observation was just like confidence to another level.
Oh, really?
And just, but just also vulnerable at the same time, and power. And that slightly jars me, if I'm honest. Powerful women. I'm like, because it can be the masculine in that triggers the masculine in me that I don't feel worthy or insecure about. Because then it's like a threat of like how other men see that. I've been journeying with this recently. It's interesting. But and I'm looking over there because that's where you were in this kind of like thing. And it just made me feel also like inspired and safe.
Interesting.
There's loads going on.
So inspired and safe, and then also the kind of the challenge of like
it was like
the dynamic of a powerful yet vulnerable woman, and how that made you feel.
There was energy there.
Thank you. I think that's a really it's I was having exactly a conversation yesterday around what it is to be a vulnerable and powerful woman, and how that can make a man feel. And where I have a preconception that I'm kind of just sitting with at the moment, when I realize, can it be disempowering for a man when a woman is really independent and doesn't necessarily need someone to, like, doesn't need a man?
I mean, you know the answers to that. Okay. Yes and no, though, because it also can, if a man is in his power, it can, that's what I want to meet. Like, that is me. That's myself. It's like, that's where I want to meet someone in their fullness.
Yeah.
And I was talking to someone yesterday about ceremony and that kind of the feminine in ceremony, who's allowed to express and just be in that kind of flow, elegance, and the slew of ingredients in that environment. It's very common for men to be like, see. I don't think we get to see that. There's something around that as well. We don't really get to see women in their like divinity, in their feminine, like pure.
Well, what's interesting is that for me to be in that place, I don't want to be rescued. I don't need rescuing. I would like support, or I'd like to be held. So there's like a kind of, it's this thing of like, if I feel like I want just someone behind me, just gently supporting there, that, you know, I can lean into if I need to and if I want to. But I don't need to be carried. And something that I've found kind of curious, I've been exploring the last few years, is that I'd had this experience of kind of drawing men towards me that were real doms, like in a sex kind of thing, like dom, and really were kind of wanting me to be a sub, and I was just like, that's not my vibe. I want to be held, but I don't want to be forced into submission. It's like energetically very different. This kind of, but my experience, and this is why I find it really interesting, and I've got a curiosity around it, as someone who, in your words, seems vulnerable and powerful, whether what I evoke in the masculine and the need to dominate sexually or dominate in life, when actually there's something, and I've been trying to be really clear, is there something in my energy around this that I can be really clear around, that I don't want to be dominated and I don't want to be pushed into submission, but I'm really welcome being held. And it's taken me like, I guess, the last year and a half of finding myself in some really extraordinary scenarios. Just like, this is not what I thought it was going to be.
I mean, I'd love you to share. We are running out of time.
It could be like, it's the illicit podcast. No, yeah, but so it's just really interesting, like, and I think there's something in me, in my communication with men, to be able to, like, I really encourage like strong masculine by my side, and there's this invitation from like for holding, but not submission, and vice versa.
Has that ever been the case?
Yeah. In my kind of long-term partnership with Ben, that was very much the case. We were kind of, I felt held and not in a kind of, felt very healthy. It's just the kind of relationships in the last few years where there's something in that has galvanized in me that's attracts a certain type of man that really likes that, but then wants to somehow dominate that or kind of have that energy. Or so it's been really interesting. So I'm just trying to work out why I've been drawn to that. And then it kind of this like comes circle around to just really wanting to choose a different type of masculine partner.
I don't know. I wouldn't want to guess or like try and pluck things out. But it's interesting. It's great to be aware of that. And I think the communication is the biggest thing, right? It's like really making the implicit explicit. I think that's the right way around. Just basically speaking to it, because we're also human. We've got these desires and animal tendencies, and it's like, that's real too. And I battle with that. I'm like, can I be unemotional in this connection? Because some people tell me that's what's true for them, and it can exist that way, and there's part of me that does, and I don't know. Maybe, but it's been so fun. Thank you so much.
You're really welcome.
Yay. Powerful, human. I really respect you and admire you. And like, this is like a new connection. So I'd love to continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You gonna be at Veg Fest?
I will be at Veg Fest.
Shout out to the Stroud community.
Yeah, I will be. Gian and I were just in the studio yesterday. We've got these 4 tracks now, 4 remix tracks. Oh my God, they are so much fun. And it's so brilliant. Yesterday we were re-recording a vocal of Radiate. He's just done this epic, like, he'd done this epic instrumental for me to sing over the top of. And it was just really, I love working with Gian. He's such a brilliant human, and kind of we're just on the same page when it comes to like our relationship to the Dharma and then our relationship with life and creativity. And we both got a really dirty sense of humor, so we just giggle a lot. And it's like, okay, I did 4 vocal takes, and when we were listening through some music, it was like, oh my God, okay, the first one was like Shirley Bassey, the next one was like sassy, the next one was like horny, and then the next one was like power strut. And I was like, this is so interesting. It's like, you know, as someone who, you know, has done session vocal work, you can be asked to come in and sing and you know, sing, give me an innocent flavor or give me rock and roll, whatever. But it was so funny to just in this moment hear the different qualities in the voice and in the feminine that came out in those places, that we are so multi-dimensional. And you know, in this conversation you will have met so many different parts of me, and vice versa. And I think that's what I love about being human, is kind of allowing all those different parts to be present and accepting all those different parts and encouraging them in others, so that we don't have to fit in some paradigm or block or box.
I love that. Just
so that the other person or us, we feel comfortable. It's like, just be whoever you want to be.
Yeah, I think that is open-heartedness.
Yeah, it is open-heartedness. Allow yourself to be you. And to come just to close with circling back to, you said, what would be something that you would suggest to somebody? It's like, to have the courage to go into the space and allow your heart to unfurl, to be with your heart. You know, go into nature and just allow yourself to be with the discomfort of the noise and the until, you know, so you can soften and feel.
Courage to feel it all. The
courage to feel it all. And it's not easy, you know. It's like kaleidoscopic.
But worth it.
Yeah, but it's, you know, one short little shot in life in this incarnation.
Yeah.
Just, it goes fast. So be kind to yourself, kind to others, kind to this planet. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'd love you to end with a song.
She'll end with a song. Be brave, courageous, and step with love. Be vulnerable and awkward. I know it can be tough, but it's time now to step into this river of life. We can barricade our hearts with all the armor that we grow, hide away from the pain, but our hearts will never know the beauty of life, wanting us to know, and say to ourselves that I am loved, and I am enough, just as I am, and you You are enough, just as you are. So celebrate sunrises, sunsets, and laughter, all that you're grateful for. This friend by your side, and the home of your hearts. We stumble, we follow, we rise up again, and the beauty of life is we can make amends, and there's choice on the road where we can believe and say to ourselves that I am loved, and I am enough, just as I am, and you are loved, and you are enough, just as you are, and I am loved, and I am enough, just as I am, and you are loved, and you are enough, just as you are, just as you are.